religious.
Do you want to state your name for the camera?
Yes, my name is Peggy Weyer.
And how long have you lived in Champaign-Urbana?
26 years, all my life.
So do you want to tell us a little bit about your coming of age, coming out story?
Sure. I suppose it happened when it was more of an outing. I told a good friend at church that I was gay, and I don't think he took it so well. I don't really remember what his reaction was. But the next thing I knew, a few days later, everybody knew that I was gay, and it was just this big fallout with church, with my, the church family, which I had been going to church since I was very young, if not when I was born. So I think that's where it started. I didn't really come out like at school or to family. It was just kind of assumed as far as my mom was concerned. But nobody in my family really took it super well. Like my mom has come around, but there's still some family members that are not so supportive. So that happened when I was 15 or 16, I believe. And so there was the falling out with the church. It was really stressful. Dropped out of high school my senior year. So I was 17 going on 18. And that's kind of was the boiling point of it. Yeah, I think that's about the condensed version, I suppose.
So what sort of resources were there in the community, if any, that you sought out and looked into?
I didn't know of any resources. Like I said, growing up within the church, it wasn't talked about other than, gay people are bad and they go to hell. There wasn't any resources that I was aware of. I don't remember necessarily seeing anything at school for it. And it's not something that I actively sought out because I just assumed that there was nothing out there, that there was nobody else like me out there. So why would there be anything to support that, support my sexuality? So I never really looked for anything, and nobody ever told me about anything. So I didn't know that if there was any resources out there, I didn't know about them at that time.
So when did that change, and what was the resource that you found community through?
Well, most recently it was the Ub Center, but I suppose when I was in the coming out phase, the way that I found other people who were like me was through local bars. And being a 16-year-old in a bar with people who were, 25, 30, 35 and up, was not the best way to kind of find out who my community was. But that's kind of how I got to know who around me was like me and shared my, the feelings that I had.
So, when did you start helping out at the Up Center?
I actually found out about it not too long after the Up Center came to be. I joined the board in January of 2010 and found out about a few meetings that they were having in December. And I found out actually through a friend who moved to out east, and she sent me a Facebook message saying that there's this new community center in town. So had it not been for her, I would have actually never known, because I don't really keep up with community happenings, I suppose you'd say. So she was the one who let me know that this was available, and I just kind of dived in head first.
So you said that you're not typically the kind of person to be super involved. What has compelled you to really take a stand within the Up Center?
Well, when I first started doing some volunteering work with the Up Center, my vision was to work primarily with the youth. And that didn't happen probably for another 6 to 8 months after and I don't know if that's accurate, I can't actually remember. But that's what I could see myself doing, since I at one point was that youth who didn't know that there were any resources, whether there were or not. I wanted to kind of be the one to give these youth these resources that I didn't have. I'm sorry, did I answer your question, or did I just spiel off into something else, which I have a tendency to do?
No, I think that's good. So you said you're part of the board. What other things do you do with the Up Center?
Well, I was on the board up until last month or a few months ago. I now am a paid staff, the first paid staff, the youth coordinator. So doing youth groups once a week, and then coordinating fundraisers, and in the future, this position is still really new. I just started like last week or something. Going into the schools, giving trainings, those types of things, talking to faculty and teachers, staff, about how they can help provide a safe space at school for their youth, and then getting the word out about our programming and helping it grow.
So you interact with youth here, but if someone who is watching this isn't comfortable enough to come to the Up Center yet, or hasn't come yet, what would you tell them, or what do you tell youth that are here, and when they ask you questions about coming out or the community itself, like what kind of resources would you point them to?
That's kind of a loaded question. What would you tell the youth? Well, I suppose if there was a youth who wasn't comfortable with coming to the group, I would just encourage that person to either contact me privately or get in touch with us somehow so that we can give them resources, because there are a lot of resources, whether it's here locally or nationally. For instance, if a youth feels like they're at a place where they just, it's too much to handle, and the load is too big, and they feel like they need to take actions to kind of end that pain, then I would refer them to like the Trevor Hotline or the Trevor Project, which combats teen suicide. And of course there's like Community Elements here in town. They do some work with youth as far as counseling is concerned. And there's actually a bunch of resources here locally, not to mention nationally now. So I would probably point them in that direction, if not, helping them here hands-on, if, that situation came to light.
So what are some of the programs that you oversee as the youth services?
Well, as far as groups go, there is the social group, which is held once every 2 weeks, and that's just kids come and they talk about whatever. Sometimes it can turn into a support group, which we also have on the on the alternate nights, which is Thursday nights. So whenever there's not social, it's support, and vice versa. And sometimes, like I said, social turns into support, depending on who's here and what the youth want to talk about at that time. Sometimes it's just they come in here and chit-chat about cats or rainbows or whatever's cool on TV, or whatever movie that they want to see, whatever music they're listening to. So, and then the opposite of that would be the support night, which is a bit more structured. Follows somewhat of a format where they can choose questions from a little cup and talk about those questions if they don't want to talk about anything specific, or they can talk about some of the experiences that they've had that week. If they were a victim of bullying at school that week, they want to talk about it, they can do that here. It's a safe space. Or they saw someone being bullied and they didn't know how to respond to that, those types of things. So that's more of the support type stuff, but again, it can kind of mesh with the social if that's what they want to talk about. And as far as that's the programming side, if there's other events that happen, such as we've had a few dances, we're planning a fundraiser for the youth to be involved in, to raise a little bit of money for the Up Center and for their programming. It just kind of varies from time to time depending on what's happening.
Are there any services for youth and their parents in regards to coming out, either support for the parents and dealing with it, or finding other parents that they can talk to and kind of get support?
Not necessarily through the Up Center right now. That is something that we are working on, because there are parents that come, that drop off their kids, and then will, don't know what to do for an hour, or if however long the groups last. So there was kind of a makeshift group for the parents. At one point, they would go to Piatto or Starbucks or something, and they would all just chit-chat about whatever. But we were looking at making somewhat more of a formal group for the parents. There is PFLAG, which happens however often it happens. I'm not 100% sure on that. So yeah, there is that, but there's not anything formally set up yet through the Up Center. But it is something that we're looking into, because that's a need as well, for the parents to be able to talk amongst themselves and say, this is what situation I'm dealing with, and then have another parent say, well, hey, I'm dealing with that too, and this is how I handled it, or however they want to go about it. And then having that be a structured group that's facilitated by an Up Center volunteer or staff. So yeah, that's something that we're looking into as well.
So how has your view of the climate of Champaign-Urbana changed since you've gotten to where you are now?
Wow, drastically, I'd have to say. Obviously, before I knew that there was an Up Center, now I knew that there were other community centers before the Up Center that, may not have taken off or done so well for whatever reason, that I was never really involved in, just because I had other things going on, or I wasn't interested, or whatever, what have you. But from 10 years ago till now, I mean, it's just been a complete 180. And that could be because now I'm around, my community much more than I was before. I don't know. I think, but that's my experience too. If I had to look at the community as a whole and what's happening with everybody within our community, I I think it's gotten better gradually, just like anything has, but there's still a lot of work to be done. I know that there was some incidences with a couple going into an establishment and being harassed because of their sexuality here in town, and that wasn't even that long ago, and you wouldn't think that that kind of thing would happen anymore, but it definitely does. So my experience has been one that's been very positive, but as far as everybody in our community within Champaign-Urbana, I can't say for sure if it's been a positive or negative change. Hopefully it's been positive, more positive than it has been in the past because of the Up Center's status here, but I'm not 100% on that.
So you mentioned the difference between the community that you found at local bars versus here. Can you go further into that and kind of explain to youth the different types and help them maybe not think that if they get one or the other, that that's the only exposure they can get?
Sure, yeah, definitely. Yeah, when I was younger and would go to those bars, there was a lot of provocative behavior, drinking, obviously, even some drug use, and that wasn't what I was into or looking for, but that was the only resource that I really had to see, there are actually other people out there like me. Let me go see if they're anything like who I am, and for the most part they weren't. So it's really good that the Up Center came about and has youth programming, so that the youth can see, this is not all there is. There are gay and lesbian and transgender and bisexual writers and artists and composers and all of these different things, rappers, and it doesn't have to be just one small part of the community. Is not the community as a whole. Did that kind of answer that question? Okay. I'm sorry. I have a tendency to spiel off onto other things.
No, you're good. Let's see. So there are books and videos here. What are other sorts of resources? Sorry. What are things that you have to offer through talk about programming? So what are, aside from programming, what are other resources that the Up Center offers youth in the community?
There's a plethora of things that we, as an organization, offer the community. What's the word I'm trying to look for? What's the word? The visibility of the community center, I suppose, offers the community a different outlet for resources instead of just the old standard, which was, the gay bar or what have you, or Pride in Chicago. Oh goodness, behind me there's a library that people are sorting out and getting ready. So many books, but then again, you can go to the library and find those same books, or go online and find those same books. But as for the Up Center, we provide a safe space, somewhere where you can go and have a conversation and give your views and not be judged or harassed or victimized because the way you want to live your life or the way that you think or what have you. Plus, I'm sure numerous other things that I just can't think about right now, or that I can't think of right now.
So you mentioned working with the local schools. What are some of the ways in which we work with schools, as well as are there any sort of signifiers for teachers who are openly allies that they should look for, students could look for?
We haven't really, as far as the Up Center is concerned, we haven't really been into the schools too much because that was kind of an area that ESISA, which is East Central Illinois Safe Schools Alliance, has been dealing with, or Illinois Safe School Alliance. As far as getting into the schools and creating lesson plans that kind of are used to be more inclusive of the LGBTQIP community. So as far as us, I mean, we haven't really done too much, which will be changing in the future. Like I said, we're hoping to get in school and give trainings and those types of things. But as far as resources are concerned, I just would contact, either myself or Kevin or whoever, one of our interns, Maggie or Lance, whoever is the intern whenever you watch this. So,
you mentioned a dance, so can you talk a little more about that? Was that associated with specific schools, or?
Yeah, it was just more of a kind of a fun thing. We had a Halloween dance, so the kids came dressed up as whatever they came dressed up as. There was a prom, a prom for us, which was fun. There was a photo booth that I set up, and it was just a good time, fun, snacks, dancing. So it was just, a place that the youth could come to and know that they wouldn't be made fun of for the way that they dressed or who they came with or what have you. And there's been a few dances in the past, and we're looking to do some more again, because dances are just fun. I mean, who doesn't like a dance, or what teenager doesn't like a dance? So, yeah, the dances are always a lot of fun. And in the future, we're looking at getting into, like movie nights or going to Skateland or, doing other fun things that aren't just dances, because you do the same thing over and over again. It gets a little boring. So we're looking at expanding upon that.
So if you were to say, I guess, is there anything that I have not asked that you were thinking you would like to say? Any youth watching this?
I suppose we've touched on everything. I would just want to restate that there are resources now. And, I would hope that the youth of our community, as a whole community, and within Champaign-Urbana and the surrounding areas, know that there is a resource here. That you don't have to resort to going to the bars or looking on the internet for things that may not be truthful. There is a support net here that they can kind of lean on if they need to. And I suppose that would be it.
I forget whether it was before the camera. When you mentioned your mother, you had talked about how she has gotten better and kind of come around.
Mm-hmm.
Is there anything you want to say about that?
I mean,
sentences?
It's one of those things. It's very individual and it varies. I was very lucky to have a parent who came around to the idea. It was one of those things where, and I find this to be true about a lot of parents. It seems like, well, it's okay if, their kid is gay, but if my kid was gay, then it would be bad. And I think that's kind of what happened in a sense with my mom. And then, kind of educating herself as to what it means to be gay, and who gay or lesbian people actually are. Not just, the bar goers, which there's nothing wrong with people who like to go to bars. I'm not trying to knock them in any way. But that there's, we're a bigger community than just that, And like I said, that was my experience. Somebody else's experience may vary. I know that there are a lot of people who are older than I am and their parents still don't accept them, which is kind of an issue that I had with the It Gets Better campaign that happened not too long ago with all the celebrities and saying that it gets better and it gets better. And yeah, sometimes it does get better. For me, it got better to a point. But sometimes, it doesn't get better, which is really sad. But that's why I think it's so great that we have a community center here to, kind of help support, whether it's a youth or an adult, through those types of situations, so that they don't have to resort to those drastic measures, which we've seen so much of. So yeah, my experience was bad at first, and then slowly got better. But so like I said, sometimes it really doesn't get better, and it's really sad that happens, and that's still some people's mindset, that it's there's something wrong with us, or we're sick, or we have some sort of disease. It's sad that people still have, are thinking that way, but that's, simply not the case. I always like to ask people because I got a lot of, well, when did you choose to be this way, or why are you like this, or why don't you like boys, or what have you. And then I would just always ask, well, when did you choose to be whatever sexuality you are, whether it's straight or whatever, and then I always kind of sets them back, like, I didn't choose, I was born this way. Same here. Me too. So yeah, it's sad that, like I said, people still think that way, but I think it's about educating yourself and becoming familiar with what it actually means to be a part of the community, instead of just assuming that we are this way or we are that way. Actually knowing the people is what's going to change a lot of perceptions. Did that answer that question? Okay. I forgot what the question was. No, I think that's about it for me. Okay. Rainbows are awesome.